If the White House is using language this sharp in public, then the real pressure behind closed doors is even more intense. Just hours ago, the White House said Donald Trump is prepared to unleash hell if Iran refuses a deal. And let's be clear right at the start, that is exactly what this video is about. Not rumors, not recycled headlines, but the real collision now taking shape between public threats, disputed diplomacy, Iran's refusal to simply accept Washington's terms, and a military buildup that suggests the window for a negotiated off-ramp may be getting smaller by the hour. This is no longer just a story about what was said at a podium. It is about whether that warning is leverage, bluff, or the final signal before a much wider regional escalation. At the center of this moment is a blunt message from White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. Her wording was not vague. She said that if Iran fails to accept the reality of the current moment and fails to understand that it has been defeated militarily, Trump will make sure it is hit harder than ever before. Then came the phrase, everyone is now repeating, President Trump does not bluff and he's prepared to unleash hell. But the important detail is what came immediately alongside that threat. The White House also insisted talks are still continuing and that those talks remain productive. So the administration is trying to project two things at the same time. Diplomacy is alive, but pressure is rising. In other words, Washington is offering an exit ramp while parking a tank next to the sign. That contradiction is what makes this story so dangerous and so important, because on one side, the White House keeps saying negotiations are real. On the other, Iranian officials and Iranian state-linked messaging have pushed back hard, with public denials, mockery, and warnings. CBS reported that an Iranian military spokesperson mocked the American line by saying Washington was negotiating with itself. ABC reported Tehran publicly denied talks had even taken place, while Reuters said a senior Iranian official described the initial response to the U.S. proposal as not positive, though not necessarily a total final rejection. So what we are watching is not clean diplomacy, it is contested diplomacy, the kind where every side wants the option of saying later, we never backed down, we never blinked first, and we never accepted the other side's narrative. And then there's the reported deal itself, the proposal at the heart of this crisis. Several outlets reported that Washington sent Tehran a 15-point framework through intermediaries, with Pakistan repeatedly mentioned as a channel. But here again, the details matter. Leavitt said reports about the plan contained elements of truth, while also warning that some of the stories being circulated were not entirely factual. That means viewers should be careful here. There appears to be a real proposal, but the full contents are still disputed in public reporting. What has been reported with more consistency is the broad direction of the U.S. demands. Iran stepping back from nuclear ambitions, curbing missile capabilities, and ending support for proxy activity across the region. Washington appears to want a strategic rollback, not just a temporary pause. Iran's response, however, points in almost the opposite direction. CBS reported that Iranian state-backed media described U.S. terms as excessive and disconnected from battlefield reality. Tehran's reported counterposition included demands such as an end to attacks, guarantees against another war, and continued sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. That last part is crucial because it reveals the real strategic heart of this confrontation. Iran is not just negotiating over abstract principles. It is signaling that maritime leverage, energy leverage, and regional deterrence remain part of its hand. From Tehran's perspective, accepting a deal that strips away those tools could look less like diplomacy and more like surrender. And that is exactly why both sides are using language designed not only for each other, but for domestic audiences, allies, rivals, and the markets watching every word. Now add the military picture and the situation becomes even more volatile. Reuters reported that the Pentagon is expected to send thousands of additional soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division to the Middle East, with one, putting the number between 3,000 and 4,000. Reuters also noted that no decision had been made to send those forces into Iran itself, but their movement would expand U.S. options for future operations in the region. That is the key phrase, expand U.S. options, because even if ground operations are not the stated plan, capability creates pressure and pressure shapes diplomacy. CBS separately reported that parts of the 82nd Airborne were expected to head to the region, while other troop and marine movements had already raised fresh questions about whether Washington is preparing for contingencies far beyond limited strikes. When diplomacy and deployment rise together, that is when uncertainty becomes strategy. And if there is one location where all of this pressure meets the real world, it is the Strait of Hormuz. Reuters described Hormuz as a far more difficult challenge than the Red Sea, warning that protecting shipping there would be harder, more dangerous, and more costly. Why? Because Iran is not a militia with limited tools. It is a state actor with missiles, drones, mines, naval assets, and immediate access to a narrow waterway used by roughly a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas supply. Experts told Reuters that convoy protection in Hormuz would require warships, aircraft, drones, helicopters, mine-clearing capacity, and potentially months of sustained operations. That means this crisis is not just about military prestige. It is about whether the global economy can function smoothly if one of the world's most important choke points stays under threat. This is why even small diplomatic signals are moving markets so quickly. Reuters and CBS both noted that oil prices dipped and global equities gained ground when investors thought a diplomatic path might still exist. That tells you something important. The world is not reacting only to missiles or troop movements. It is reacting to perception. One presidential post, one press briefing, one rumor of a plan, one denial from Tehran, and markets reprice the risk of disruption. If Hormuz remains threatened, the impact spreads far beyond the Gulf. Shipping costs rise, energy costs rise, food, manufacturing, aviation, insurance, all of them feel the shock. So when the White House uses highly charged language while still claiming talks are productive, it is not just speaking to Iran. It is also speaking to voters, investors, allies, and nervous governments asking the same question. Is this crisis heading toward a deal or just pausing before the next escalation? There is also a political layer inside the United States that makes all of this even more delicate. CBS reported that Trump said he does not want to call the Iran conflict a war because of the issue of congressional approval. Lawmakers have also pressed for more answers, with the chair of the House Armed Services Committee saying members are not getting enough detail from the Pentagon. Reuters reported that public support for U.S. strikes on Iran remains low, with a Reuters Ipsos poll showing more Americans disapprove than approve. So while the administration wants to project confidence and momentum, it is also operating under real domestic constraints. That matters because a president can sound decisive in a briefing room, but a longer, costlier operation changes the politics very quickly, especially if energy prices rise and casualties mount. The diplomatic picture is just as messy. Multiple countries have reportedly tried to mediate, including Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt. ABC noted that Pakistan and Egypt had both offered to host talks, while Reuters also pointed to broader efforts at mediation. But public diplomacy and real diplomacy are not always the same thing. Sometimes proposals are floated to test seriousness. Sometimes intermediaries are used so both sides can keep denying direct engagement. Sometimes leaders want a deal but cannot look eager for one. That is why Leavitt's statement was so carefully calibrated. She did not fully confirm the reported plan. She did not fully deny it either. She said talks continue, said reporting included some truth, but refused to negotiate details from the podium. In plain language, that sounds like an administration that wants maximum flexibility, enough openness to preserve talks, enough ambiguity to preserve leverage. And here is where the rhetoric really matters. In crisis diplomacy, words are not decoration, they are instruments. A phrase like prepared to unleash hell is not used casually from a White House podium. It is designed to do several things at once: warn Tehran, reassure hawks at home, signal resolve to allies, and raise the psychological price of refusing a deal. But language this aggressive also narrows room for compromise. Because once leaders define the other side as defeated, unreasonable, or delusional, any softer outcome can start to look like weakness. That is the trap of public escalation. The stronger the words, the harder it becomes to climb back down without some visible concession. So the White House may believe it is strengthening its negotiating position, but Tehran may hear something else entirely, that Washington wants submission packaged as diplomacy. That brings us to the three paths now in front of this crisis. The first is a narrow, diplomatic breakthrough. Not a grand peace, but a limited formula where both sides claim success and step back from the brink. The second is controlled escalation. More deployments, more pressure, more threats, perhaps more strikes, but with both sides still trying to stop short of a wider regional collapse. The third is miscalculation. The path where military signaling, public messaging, and strategic pride collide. And miscalculation does not need a formal declaration. It can come from one disputed strike, one shipping incident, one retaliation that lands in the wrong place, or one political leader deciding that backing down is more dangerous than pressing forward. That is why the mood around this story feels so unstable, because everyone involved says they want control, yet every move being made increases the number of variables that can escape it. So if you strip away the noise, the core reality is this. The White House says Trump is ready to hit harder if Iran does not make a deal, but at the same time insists negotiations are alive. Iran, meanwhile, is signaling that it will not simply accept Washington's terms on Washington's timeline. Troops are moving. Hormuz remains the strategic pressure point. Markets are reacting to every headline. And the most important facts are still the simplest ones. The title is real. The warning was real, the talks are disputed, and the outcome is still uncertain. This is not a settled endgame. It is a live power struggle between coercion and compromise, and right now, both are accelerating together. And that is the real story viewers need to watch in the coming hours. Not just whether a deal is announced, but what kind of deal, who gets to define it, and whether either side still has enough room to claim victory without pushing the region into a deeper crisis. Because once threats become doctrine and deployments become momentum, events start moving faster than statements. The White House has delivered its warning. Tehran has pushed back. The world is now waiting to see whether this is the final pressure before a deal or the final warning before the next phase begins.